A teenage girl sprints across a Houston runway, screaming one line that halts a billionaire's private jet. Don't fly. It's been sabotaged. Shaquille O'Neal listens. Seconds later, they find the bomb. She's not his daughter. She's not a prodigy. She's just the only one who noticed, and the only one they didn't plan for. Now they're both targets, and the truth her father died protecting. It's finally ready to fly. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The Texas morning heat shimmered off the tarmac like breath on glass, the kind of thick summer air that made suits feel like armor and silence crackle like static. A private Gulfstream G650 sat poised near Hangar 6 at the George Bush Intercontinental Airport, its nose pointed like a silver spear toward the horizon. The jet's polished fuselage gleamed in the sun, engines humming in low idle, a whisper of power restraint. Shaquille O'Neal stood at the base of the mobile stairway, one foot on the first step, sunglasses shading his eyes from the blaze overhead. He looked like a man cut from calm itself, broad-shouldered, dressed in a slate gray linen suit, dark shirt, no tie. His presence carried a kind of hush, the quiet weight of a man who had seen fame, loss, and everything in between. Beside him, two assistants murmured last-minute confirmations about the Houston Children's Relief Gala, where Shaq was set to speak as the keynote donor. Cameras waited on the other side. Applause, speeches, a simple flight. Everything was timed to the second. Then it came. A voice, small, high, and ragged with fear. Don't fly that jet. It's been sabotaged. The sound ripped through the sweltering air like a slingshot through glass. At first nobody moved. The ground crew froze. One of Shaq's aides half turned, confused. Security tensed, 3 men in black polo shirts and mirrored sunglasses scanning the perimeter like panthers. Their hands moved to their belts, a whisper of something unscheduled, something off script. The voice came again, louder this time. Please, don't go up. Check the tail, under the rudder panel. Something's wrong. From the far end of the tarmac, she came into view, a girl running flat out across the sun-baked concrete. No clearance badge, no airport escort, just raw desperation in motion. Her blue cotton dress flapped at her knees, stained at the hem with dust. Her sneakers, worn and uneven, slapped the ground with frantic rhythm. Braids flew behind her like ribbons caught in a storm. Who the hell is that? One of the guards muttered, already in motion. The lead guard radioed for backup. 2 others began to sprint toward her intercept path, but she kept running, undeterred, straight toward the aircraft. No hesitation, no pause, just urgency. Shaq had already taken off his sunglasses. He squinted toward the girl, one massive hand now shielding his brow, the other tightening on the stair railing. His face changed, not panic, not annoyance, but something more searching, focused, curious. The girl was shouting again. Check the access panel, near the landing gear. Please. Something's wrong. She reached the rear wheel well just as one of the guards grabbed her arm. She didn't resist. She didn't try to run again. She just pointed, frantic, panting, eyes wide as the Gulf.
There. Under that panel. It's not closed right. Something's inside, some kind of box. Wires. It doesn't belong there. The lead security officer barked into his radio. Possible threat on site. Repeat. Breach in Zone 2. Detain and clear. Another guard started pulling the girl away, but Shaq's voice cut through the air like thunder.
Wait. Don't touch her. The guard turned. Sir. Protocol. I said don't touch her. Let her speak. Now all eyes were on him. At 7'1", and still carrying that unmistakable presence, Shaq didn't need to raise his voice. When he said something, the world adjusted. The guard let go. The girl stood trembling, hands balled into fists, but she didn't back away. Shaq came down the steps, slowly. The distance between him and the girl shrank with each stride, and yet the contrast between them grew. One, an icon, millionaire, mogul, legend. The other, barely a teenager, skin dusty, arms scratched, voice shaking but unwavering. He crouched slightly to meet her eyes. What's your name? He asked gently. Maya, she said. Maya Williams. Why'd you come out here like that, Maya? You know this is a secure area, right? I had to, she breathed. I was listening to the radio bands this morning. My dad taught me how. I heard static on the maintenance channel. Weird distortions. So I went to the fence like I do sometimes. And I saw it. The access panel near the tail. It wasn't flush. It was hanging open just a bit. Someone closed it after. But not all the way. I swear. He blinked, slow and heavy, as if weighing each syllable. Your dad taught you that. He was a pilot, she said. He died 5 years ago. They said it was mechanical failure. But I always thought, her voice cracked. I always thought it didn't add up. Silence settled again, heavy and dry. Shaq stood to full height, turned to the mechanic standing near the rear wheel, and spoke calmly. Go check that panel. Now. Sir. With all due. Check it. The guard didn't argue again. He radioed another tech, and together they moved to the tail, kneeling beneath the access panel, as Maya had described. The tarmac held its breath. The seconds crawled. Then, sir? The mechanic called out, voice changed. Taut. We've got a device down here. It's not standard. The second tech leaned in. Red diode. Blinking. Timer. Looks wired to the hydraulic lines. Definitely not ours. Maya looked up at Shaq, tears welling in her eyes. He didn't flinch, didn't smile. Just nodded once. Slow.
Get the bomb squad, he said. Clear the area.
As the ground crew scrambled into emergency mode, Shaq turned back to the girl. You saved my life, he said, voice low. That's not something I forget. A loudspeaker began blaring across the tarmac, warning all nearby personnel to evacuate the area. Shaq didn't move yet. The girl, still shaking, suddenly looked very small. Why'd you risk it? He asked. You could have been hurt, arrested, worse. She looked up at him, not blinking. Because nobody listens to kids. But my dad always said, if something doesn't feel right in your gut, it probably isn't, and you have to speak up, even if nobody wants you to. Shaq's jaw flexed slightly, something flickering behind his eyes. He looked at her as if seeing someone else, maybe even himself, from long ago. Young, determined, with the world stacked against them. The flashing lights of emergency vehicles bathed the tarmac in red and blue. Technicians rushed to secure the area. A news chopper began circling overhead. Shaq turned to one of his assistants and said, get her name, find out where she lives, and make sure she gets home safe. He paused. No, I'll do it myself. And with that, Shaquille O'Neal, the giant, the mogul, the man the world called Big Shaq, turned away from his private jet and towards something far more unpredictable, more human, and perhaps more important. A girl who had screamed through the noise and been heard. In the distance, the jet engines powered down. The world would have to wait, because sometimes, even legends need to stop and listen. Tone. Introspective, cinematic, emotionally rich, with undercurrents of suspense and moral tension. The Houston air felt different that evening, like it had absorbed the tension from the tarmac earlier that day, and decided to hang on to it. The sun was beginning to lower, stretching shadows across Peon Street where the houses sat shoulder to shoulder, their porches lined with sun-bleached plastic chairs and chain-link fences tangled in honeysuckle. It was a neighborhood built on habit and memory, the kind where time passed slowly, but everyone remembered what mattered, who came, who left, and who carried pain behind their smiles. Inside a narrow house at the end of the street, the windows were cracked open to let in the breeze. The ceiling fan creaked in tired rhythm above the kitchen table. Maya sat there, her shoulders hunched, arms folded tightly around a faded blue backpack that hadn't left her side since the airport. Her sneakers, dusty from the tarmac, were still on her feet, heels tapping nervously against the linoleum floor. Across from her stood Ruth Williams, her grandmother, stirring a pot of red beans and rice, with the kind of focus that meant she was thinking hard. Ruth was a woman who rarely spoke more than necessary, and never asked questions she didn't want real answers to. Her hair, silver gray and pulled into a low bun, shimmered under the flickering light above the stove. Why'd you run, Maya? Ruth asked finally, voice calm but edged with steel. You know how that could have gone. You could have been hurt, or worse. Maya looked up, eyes wide but steady. I saw something, Grandma. The panel on the jet. It wasn't sealed. It was cracked open, and I just knew something wasn't right. I tried to tell someone, but no one listened. So I ran. You always running, child. Ever since your daddy passed, you don't sit still 5 minutes unless it's to listen to static on that old radio. Maya swallowed hard. It wasn't just the panel. I heard something weird this morning. On the maintenance channel. It was scrambled, but not noise. Someone was talking. Kind of coded. It sounded like they were planning something. Ruth turned from the stove. setting the spoon down. She leaned on the counter, arms crossed. You been listening in on air traffic again? I always do. Daddy showed me how to before the crash. That word always hung heavy in this house. Crash. 5 years ago, Daniel Williams' plane went down over Galveston Bay. He was alone, flying a test route for a new navigation system. The report blamed mechanical failure, control failure under high-frequency GPS denial. But Maya never bought that. Neither did Ruth. But theories don't raise the dead, and suspicion doesn't feed a child. So they kept quiet. Until today. You saying this has to do with your daddy? Ruth asked, her voice lower now, the weight of the question pulling it toward the floor. I don't know. But maybe. That system, the one that Jet was flying, it's the same company he worked for. Nav Pro Systems. He used to say there were bugs in their updates. He said someone kept pushing the firmware through too fast. Ruth looked at her for a long moment. Her eyes were sharp, but tired. She walked over to the table and sat across from Maya, folding her hands. What you did today, that was brave. Foolish, but brave. But this ain't a game, Maya. These people, they powerful, real powerful. You don't poke at sleeping dogs unless you're ready to get bit. Before Maya could reply, there was a knock at the door. 3 slow raps. Then silence. Ruth's back went straight. She stood quickly, wiping her hands on a towel, and crossed to the front door, pausing only to grab the wooden bat, leaning in the corner of the pantry. Maya stayed still, heart thudding in her chest. The knock came again, softer this time. Ruth opened the door just a crack, squinting through the screen. And there he was. Shaquille O'Neal, standing on her porch in a white button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, dark jeans, and a leather briefcase slung over one shoulder. No cameras, no security, just a giant of a man, with an expression Ruth hadn't expected. Humble, serious, and strangely tired. Evening, ma'am, he said gently. I hope I'm not disturbing anything. Ruth stared at him, unsure how to respond. You're the man from the news. Yes, ma'am. I'm Shaquille. Most people just call me Shaq. I know who you are, she said flatly. What are you doing here? He nodded toward the hallway where Maya was peeking around the corner. I came to talk. If that's all right. It won't take long. Ruth didn't move right away, but after a breath she unlatched the door and stepped aside. 5 minutes, she said. In the living room, the air was thick with the smell of beans, lemon polish, and unease. Shaq took a seat on the edge of the couch, careful to not lean back too far, his massive frame clearly unaccustomed to the fragile quiet of someone else's home. Maya sat across from him, still clutching her backpack like it held her whole world. I wanted to thank you, Shaq said after a pause. Not just for saving my life, but for speaking up. That's not easy, especially when no one believes you. Maya shifted. I didn't do it for attention. I know that, he said. I did a little digging after I left the airport. Turns out your dad was working on the same system I've been endorsing for years. NavPro's new guidance tech, the one they've been rushing through tests for. You didn't know? Maya asked. Shaq shook his head slowly. No, I trusted their reports, trusted the people in charge. I figured if something wasn't safe, someone would say so. I was wrong. Maya opened her backpack and pulled out a wrinkled notebook. She flipped to a page covered in sketches, diagrams of aircraft panels, signal frequencies, system outputs. This is what I've been tracking. I started after my dad died, trying to figure out why his crash didn't make sense. Shaq studied the drawings with quiet intensity. He tapped one of the pages. That's the access panel from today. Maya nodded. Same design, same fault. Ruth cleared her throat from the kitchen. If this is about dragging my granddaughter into some investigation, we're not interested. She's already done enough. I agree, Shaq said without flinching. But I think you both deserve answers, and I might have a way to get them. He opened his briefcase and took out a sealed folder. Inside was a scholarship letter, full tuition to the Flight Futures program he'd helped build, along with simulator access, mentorship, and direct training with licensed aviation engineers. She's got talent, Shaq said to Ruth, and more guts than most grown men I know. I want to help her go further. Ruth glanced at Maya, then at the envelope. She didn't speak, but her eyes softened just slightly. Shaq turned back to Maya. You want to keep digging into this? I'll back you. Quietly. I have friends at the FAA, people I trust. We can start asking the right questions. Maya stared at the envelope, then at the man offering it. For the first time since her father's death, someone wasn't just listening to her. They believed her. Later that night, long after Shaq had left, and the house had gone still, Maya sat on her bed, with her father's old compass in one hand, and the envelope in the other. Outside her window, the hum of night traffic mixed with the distant echo of a train horn. She looked up at the ceiling, the fan casting shadows like propeller blades across the room, and whispered to the dark, "I think I found someone, Dad. Someone who listens." And somewhere on the other side of the city, in a penthouse office where framed jerseys shared space with framed patents, Shaquille O'Neal stood staring out at the skyline. In his hand, he held a photo of his old pilot, gone too soon, taken in a crash that now didn't feel so accidental. Truth had begun to stir. Quietly, steadily, and neither Shaq nor Maya knew it yet. But the world was about to hear it loud and clear. The late afternoon air over the airport had shifted from heat-heavy to electric, like the atmosphere just before a thunderstorm. Orange sunlight streaked low across the tarmac, casting long shadows beneath the wings of Shaquille O'Neal's private jet. Engines once idling in routine had now gone completely silent, and the quiet that replaced them felt unnatural, too still, like the world had momentarily paused to decide what came next. Maya stood off to the side of the runway now, not far from where security had briefly held her. Her braids clung to the sweat at the back of her neck, and her hands, so steady when she was shouting across the tarmac, were now trembling at her sides. But her eyes, wide and focused, hadn't left the plane. A group of mechanics and one flight tech crouched near the rear wheel of the jet, exactly where she had pointed moments earlier. One of them had already pried open the small panel beneath the rudder access bay. Shaq stood a few feet behind them, arms crossed, jaw set, watching without a word. He hadn't reboarded the plane, hadn't gone back to his phone or taken another meeting. From the second she had cried out, he hadn't looked away. The mechanic, a balding man in his 50s with oil-stained coveralls, gave a low whistle. "Got something," he called. Everyone turned. The mechanic leaned in closer with a flashlight and gently nudged at a tangle of small black wires, fed through the edges of the panel and leading to a matte black box not much bigger than a walkie-talkie. A faint red light blinked steadily on its surface, like the pulse of something alive. The second tech stepped back instinctively. "That's not ours. Not factory, not even retrofit. Could be remote triggered," the first mechanic muttered. "And this wire here, it's tapped into the hydraulic return. If it engaged mid-flight," he didn't finish the sentence. The lead security officer, still standing near Shaq, exchanged a glance with one of his men and nodded once before grabbing his radio. "We've got a confirmed device. Repeat, confirmed unknown hardware integrated with the aircraft's control line. Alert explosive ordnance team and clear a 500-foot perimeter." A spark of panic rippled through the ground crew. What had started as a routine pre-departure had now turned into a full-on protocol escalation. Shaq slowly stepped forward, his tall frame cutting through the crowd with the calm intensity of a man trained to stay composed when others cracked. He stopped near the open panel and stared down at the blinking box. "This would have taken out the plane?" he asked, voice low. The mechanic nodded without looking up. "If you'd hit cruising altitude and the pressure changed just right. Yeah. Could have looked like a hydraulic blowout. No beacon, no distress signal, no survivors." Shaq's eyes shifted toward Maya. She stood 10 feet away, backlit by the sinking sun, her hands clenched into small fists now. She didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Shaq walked over to her. "You saw this?" he asked. "I saw the panel wasn't flush," she said quickly. "I check them on planes at the yard sometimes. That one looked off, and the way the sun hit it, I saw the lip, the way it caught light." "You said something about a signal." Maya nodded. "On the airband. Scrambled but too close to maintenance frequency, like a ghost signal. I'd never heard anything like it. When I saw the panel, it clicked." "You ever been wrong before?" "Not once," she said. "Not when it feels like that. Not in my gut." Shaq studied her for a long moment. In her he saw something unexpected, something unnervingly familiar, a clarity of thought, a boldness, not taught, but earned. It reminded him of Mara, his daughter, when she'd stood up for a teammate after a bad call, the same flint in the eyes, the same refusal to stay quiet even when everyone else did. But there was something else too, something that pulled deeper, reached into memory. A young version of himself, 12 years old, poor, misunderstood, too tall for his grade, constantly dismissed, as slow just because he didn't speak much. The world had mistaken his silence for lack of depth, but inside he'd always been building things, arguments, ideas, strategies, just like she was doing now. You trust what you saw? He asked her. I do. Good. Because I trust what I saw too. Maya blinked. What did you see? You? Shaq said quietly. Running across that runway, yelling at a jet like your life depended on it. No hesitation. That's not a prank. That's real. They stood there a beat longer, the sounds of chaos behind them beginning to organize into procedures. Bomb unit en route, media being kept off site, flight manifest reviewed for any other anomalies. But here, between Shaq and Maya, the air was still and heavy with unspoken understanding. A man in a dark suit approached, earpiece tucked behind his jaw. One of Shaq's personal team. Sir, he said quietly, we've cancelled the gala appearance. Media's catching wind of something, but we've got a perimeter. Local FBI field contact is requesting a closed-door debrief. They'll be here in 30. Shaq nodded. Let them come. Should we get her home? He looked back to Maya, who was still holding her notebook tight to her chest. No. I'll take her myself. The man paused. Unsure. Are you sure that's wise? I'm sure it's right. Back inside the vehicle. An armored SUV cooled to Arctic levels. Shaq drove without speaking at first. Maya sat in the front seat, looking around like she couldn't quite believe any of it was real. She'd never sat in anything this smooth before. The dash was touchscreen, the console stitched with leather. Her backpack looked out of place, like a paper kite in a fighter jet. You know, Shaq said finally, eyes still on the road. People always think being big makes you fearless. Doesn't it? Maya asked. Only when you know what you're standing for, he said. Otherwise, size just makes you a bigger target. Maya didn't reply, but her grip on her backpack eased. Your dad, Shaq continued. He worked on NavPro systems, right? She looked over at him, surprised. You knew him? No, but I know the work. My pilot, Marcus, used to talk about him. Said Daniel Williams was the only systems engineer who'd call out dangerous patches during review. Most engineers just signed off and stayed quiet. But not him. Maya's throat caught. That's why he died, she said. He found something, and someone made sure he wouldn't share it. Shaq's hands tightened around the steering wheel. My pilot's plane went down 6 months ago, he said, voice low. Wasn't flying for me that day. Just running a routine sim check. System failure. Same story. I didn't question it then. Why not? Because sometimes you get used to the world lying to you, Shaq answered. Especially when it does it politely. He pulled into a quiet street lined with small houses and peeling fences. Maya pointed toward the corner unit with a sagging porch swing and blue shutters. That one. Before she could reach for the handle, Shaq stopped her. You still have that notebook? She nodded. Keep it close. Keep it safe. And tomorrow, if you want, we'll talk again. Because I think you're right. And I think this goes deeper than just one plane. Maya hesitated. Why do you care? Shaq looked at her. Really looked. And then said, because I'm not letting another kid carry the weight of proof no one else wants to see. When she climbed out and ran up to the porch where Ruth was already standing, Shaq didn't drive off right away. He watched her reach the door, turn back, and wave. Not big, not performative. Just a small wave that said, I'm still here. And for the first time in years, so was the truth. Fragile. Small. But loud enough to be heard. Shaq adjusted the strap of his leather briefcase and knocked once. 3 soft taps. The kind that didn't announce power. Just presence. There was a pause. Then the scrape of a curtain shifting. Then the click of the door latch. Ruth Williams opened the door halfway, one hand still gripping the frame. Her eyes were sharp, narrowed slightly, and without greeting she asked, You come alone? Shaq nodded. Yes, ma'am. She studied him for a long second. Not the celebrity, not the height, not the name, just the man. After a beat, she stepped aside. You've got 5 minutes. Any longer I start asking questions. Shaq smiled faintly as he stepped inside. Fair. The living room was small but clean. Walls hung with old family photos and a cross-stitch of the Serenity Prayer framed in dark wood. A ceiling fan buzzed overhead, casting slow-moving shadows across the floor. The couch creaked under Shaq's weight as he sat, adjusting carefully, the briefcase resting on one knee. Maya appeared at the hallway's edge, still in her blue dress but with her braids retied and face washed. though a faint smudge of tarmac still clung near her cheekbone. Her backpack was slung over her shoulder like she was ready to flee again, at any moment. She gave him a small nod. Shaq returned it, then gently patted the spot on the couch beside him. "You got that notebook you mentioned earlier?" Without speaking, Maya walked over and pulled the faded red composition book from her bag. She hesitated only a second before handing it to him. Shaq opened it with care. The pages were full, ink diagrams of rudder systems, fuel control schematics, hand-drawn waveforms from radio scans. Each entry was labeled dated, cross-referenced with codes and frequencies. It was meticulous, precise. "You did all this yourself?" he asked. "Mostly at night," she said. "When I couldn't sleep." Shaq flipped to a marked page. "This here. Nav Pro V. That's the system your dad was working on." Maya nodded. It was supposed to revolutionize mid-flight navigation, especially in areas without GPS coverage. But Dad said they were rushing development, that they were hiding signal errors. He flagged something called algorithm drift, when the system misreads position data under solar flare interference. Shaq looked up at her. "That's not in any report I've read." He wrote about it in his test evaluations. But they never published them. From the kitchen, Ruth leaned against the doorway, arms crossed tight. "He came over a week before the crash," she said. "Said if anything ever happened to him, to hold on to his field notes." I didn't understand at the time. He wasn't scared, but he was tired, like he knew something was coming. Shaq looked back at the notebook, running a thumb across the edge. "One of my closest friends, Marcus. He was my pilot. He died 6 months ago flying a test sim. Same system, same plane model, same unexplained failure. They blamed a pressure lock, but I always felt something didn't line up." Maya's voice barely rose above a whisper. "It wasn't random." Shaq nodded slowly. "No. I don't think it was." Ruth stepped forward, the lines in her face deeper now. "So what exactly are you saying, Mr. O'Neal? That this company NavPro was willing to kill a man over a bad patch of code?" "I don't know yet," Shaq said honestly. "But I do know this. Daniel Williams warned them. Marcus trusted them. And now both of them are gone." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. He handed it to Maya. "What's this?" she asked, careful as she opened it. "A full scholarship to my Flight Futures program," he said. 3-month simulator access, engineering mentorship, FAA prep courses. You'll train with licensed flight instructors. Hands-on." Maya stared at the letter, then back at him. "Why me?" "Because you see things others ignore. Because you knew something was wrong, and had the guts to shout anyway. And because you already understand what most adults never learn. Flying isn't just about controls. It's about listening. To systems. To instinct. To silence." Ruth folded her arms tighter. "And what happens after the program?" "What then?" "That's up to her," Shaq said. "But if she wants to help me find out why this keeps happening, why men like your son and my pilot ended up in flames for telling the truth, then I'd like her to help me." Maya's hands shook slightly as she held the scholarship letter. "I don't want a reward," she said. "I want answers." "Then we're looking for the same thing," Shaq replied. A soft sound interrupted them. The back door creaked open slightly from the wind. Ruth instinctively turned her head, eyes narrowing. "Old hinges," she said, but her tone was tighter now. "Still, maybe it's time you left, Mr. O'Neal. Too much noise draws attention, and I'm not in the mood for visits I didn't invite." Shaq stood, nodding in respect. "I understand, but before I go, there's one more thing." He took a folded photo from the inner pocket of his briefcase. It showed a group of flight technicians from a safety seminar 3 years ago. At the far right, Daniel Williams stood smiling in front of a whiteboard, laser pointer in hand. On the board, Nav Pro V safety review. Beside of, a younger Marcus wore a cap backward and grinned like he'd just made a joke. "I didn't know your father well," Shaq said, handing the photo to Maya. "But I remembered his face. He made an impression. He challenged our assumptions. That stuck with me." Maya took the photo with both hands, her breath catching as she stared at her father's image. "I didn't know anyone kept this," she said. "Sometimes," Shaq said, "legacy doesn't die. It just waits to be remembered." As he stepped back onto the porch, the sun had vanished completely, leaving the sky streaked with navy and gold. Streetlights flickered on one by one, the soft hum of electricity rising in the silence. Maya followed him out. "I want to help," she said. Whatever this is, whoever tried to sabotage that plane, I want to know why. And I want to finish what my dad started. Shaq turned to her, the porch light casting half his face in shadow. Then keep that notebook close, he said. And get some sleep. Because tomorrow, we start chasing ghosts. He walked down the porch steps and into the growing dark, disappearing into the waiting SUV that had pulled around the corner, headlights off. Inside, Maya stood at the door, envelope in hand, her fingers tracing the raised logo of the Flight Futures program. Behind her, Ruth locked the door and slid the deadbolt with a definitive click. "You sure about this?" she asked. Maya nodded. "For the first time," she whispered. "I think I am." And in the quiet that followed, the shift was complete. The world had changed. Not loudly, not with a bang, but with a soft knock at the door, and a truth that refused to be buried. The next morning came in gray and quiet, with low clouds blanketing the Houston skyline like a warning. Rain hadn't fallen, but the air felt damp and close, heavy with something unsaid. Inside the Williams house, the TV murmured in the background, though no one was watching. The news anchor's voice drifted like static. Another corporate merger, a senator's speech, something vague about airline innovation, but none of it touched the heartbeat of what was unfolding in this house. Maya sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, her back against the wall, surrounded by a scattered storm of papers, photos, circuit sketches, and the same red notebook that had first caught Shaq's attention. The envelope he'd given her from the Flight Futures program sat unopened nearby, half forgotten now. Today her focus was on something older. She held the aged manila envelope in both hands. It had been tucked in the lining of her father's old aviation jacket, hidden behind a seam Ruth had stitched up years ago. The jacket had been hanging in the back of the closet, untouched, smelling faintly of engine oil and citrus cologne. Maya hadn't opened it until this morning, drawn by instinct, not logic. The tape on the envelope was brittle, the paper creased and yellowed. Her name was written across the front in clean, blocky handwriting. Maya, in case. She took a breath, peeled back the flap, and inside found two things: a folded sheet of paper and a USB drive. She opened the letter first. It was handwritten, slanted, and neat. The kind of writing she remembered watching as a child when he filled out logbooks late at night. "If you're reading this, it means something happened. And I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you everything in person, but there wasn't time. There's something wrong with the Nav Pro V system. They're rushing it, ignoring safety flags. I've submitted reports, filed alerts, but it keeps getting buried. I think someone's intercepting them. This drive has copies of my test data, error logs, SIM crashes, internal comms, everything I could pull. You need to get it to someone who flies, someone with reach. Don't trust the board. Trust your instincts. That's what I always told you. You're sharper than anyone I know. If anyone can find the truth, it's you. I love you, kiddo. Keep your feet on the ground, and your eyes on the sky." Dad. Her hands were trembling as she finished. A quiet sob rose up, but didn't escape. She blinked it back, knelt, and carefully inserted the USB into her laptop. The screen lit up with folders, clearly labeled and time-stamped. Test logs, NPV, nav code overlays, radio intercepts, alt drift reports, final flight sim backup. One folder sat alone at the bottom of the drive. Private audio. Maya clicked open the test logs first. Pages of data scrolled across the screen. Performance inconsistencies, altitude misreads, critical sensor lag, under solar interference. There were simulations where the Nav Pro V system had falsely shown stability, even while planes dropped below safe altitude, and annotations in red. Filed but rejected. No review ID generated. Cross-check needed. No verification. Possible tampering with crash log sync. She flipped to the overlays. Flight footage clips layered with cockpit telemetry. Her father's voice could be heard calmly calling out issues. Nav guidance desync. Attempting manual override. Error still present on backup. Altitude reading inconsistent with physical horizon. Then came a clip labeled Final Sim Flight Echo. She pressed play. Her father's voice came through, lower than she remembered, but steady, running a repeat of Echo Route 4B. Manual override cued if drift repeats. Beginning ascent. Then another voice. Not her father's. Calm, quiet. It sounded like it was coming through a second channel intercom. Phone? Execute before he files. Make it look like failure. Maya's stomach dropped. Then static. Then silence. Then impact alarm. End of file. She sat frozen for several seconds, her breath caught like it might never come back. That voice had been deliberate, detached, the tone of someone giving a command they'd already justified in their mind. She replayed the clip. Execute before he filed. Make it look like failure. She whispered. He was murdered. The words made her chest tighten. But they didn't break her. They hardened her. She grabbed a USB, shut her laptop, and ran. In the conference room of the Flight Futures hangar, sunlight filtered through high glass windows onto a clean oak table. Shaq stood at the far end, staring at a chart pinned on the whiteboard. It was a systems tree, a flow diagram of the Nav Pro V software. He'd been studying it for hours, tracing connection lines like threads on a crime board. When the door burst open, he turned. Maya stood in the frame, breathless, holding the USB drive like it was a detonator. I found it, she said. Shaq crossed the room quickly. Found what? Proof. Of everything. She plugged the drive into the conference laptop. The screen blinked to life. Files flooding into view. She walked him through each folder, each error log, then played the final recording. When it ended, Shaq didn't speak. Not at first. He stared at the screen. Then down at his hands. Then quietly. That voice, whoever gave that order, they had access to internal comms. Couldn't be just anyone. Maya nodded. I think they knew Dad was going to file a formal report. Something they couldn't bury. They took him out before he could. And now they tried the same thing to me. Shaq said, his voice low and steady. Because I was flying that system. Publicly endorsing it. If that plane went down, no one would ask questions. They'd say I died in a tragic malfunction. And they'd push the system through. Maya finished. Untested. Unsafe. Shaq stepped back from the table, eyes scanning the room like it could give him answers. Then he looked at Maya. You saved me, he said. And now you might have just saved hundreds of lives. But we're not done. Maya watched him, unsure what came next. What do we do? We finish what your dad started. Shaq said. We take this to someone who can't be bought. Someone who'll listen. And if they try to bury it again, then we go public. He said. But not yet. Not until we know who was behind that voice. Because once we speak, we don't get a second chance. Maya looked down at the USB. Its red light blinking softly. I don't want a second chance, she said. I want the truth. They stood in silence for a long beat. The low hum of the servers the only sound. Then Shaq nodded once. Then buckle up. We're flying straight into a storm. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing dust across the hangar floor. Something had shifted. Not just in their investigation, but in them. Maya had crossed the line from curious daughter to determined seeker of justice. And Shaq, once a bystander to quiet corruption, had become its loudest threat. Somewhere beyond the skyline, someone who thought they'd gotten away with it, felt a chill they couldn't explain. The truth had woken up, and it was headed their way. Tone. Tense. Suspenseful. Emotionally resolute, with an undercurrent of strategic tension. The message came at 1:13 p.m., just as Maya was finishing a systems analysis session in the Flight Futures simulator bay. She had been fine-tuning a virtual cockpit panel when her phone vibrated. She didn't check it immediately. She was focused, completely absorbed in identifying a relay issue on the auxiliary power bus. But the buzz came again, insistent. When she finally picked up the phone, the message sat on the screen like a whisper laced with warning. Hangar B, 4:00 p.m. Come alone. Don't tell Shaq. This is important. No number, no name, just the words. Sharp, deliberate, cold. Maya stared at it for a long time. Her gut twisted. The hangar referenced Hangar B was an old maintenance shell on the far side of the airfield. Half forgotten, unused since before her father's death. It had no security cams, no windows, a place built to be silent. She pocketed the phone and walked out into the corridor where Shaq and Captain Whitmore were reviewing telemetry data on a wall monitor. The hallway lights buzzed softly above them, and everything about the moment felt ordinary, until Maya's presence made it different. Whitmore noticed first. Something up? He asked. Maya held out the phone, showing the message. Shaq took it, read it once, then again, slower. His face didn't change, but his silence grew heavier. This could be bait, he said quietly. It's meant to separate her, Whitmore added. Whoever sent it doesn't want witnesses. Ruth, who had just arrived with a tray of sandwiches for the group, stepped closer, reading the screen from over Shaq's shoulder. Her eyes narrowed. "No child's going alone anywhere today," she said flatly. "Not to meet ghosts. Not to meet liars. Not even if the sky opens." "I'm not planning to," Maya said. "But I think we should go." Shaq looked at her then. Not just as a kid, not even as the daughter of Daniel Williams. He looked at her like a partner, someone who had already walked through fire and didn't flinch. "I'll call Agent Morales," he said. At 3:47 p.m., the old Ford pickup Shaq often drove when he didn't want attention turned onto the private access road behind Hangar B. Its tires crunched over gravel, pulling to a stop beneath a lone sycamore that offered some visual cover from the lot. Maya sat in the back seat, calm but wired, a hidden microphone clipped inside her jacket collar. From the front, Morales turned slightly to face her. "Remember," she said, "you're not there to press. Just talk. Let him feel in control. And if he makes a move, we're in that door before he gets a word out." Maya nodded. "Mic check," Whitmore said, his voice crackling from the receiver in her collar. "You copy?" "Clear," she said. "You ready?" "Always." Shaq looked at her through the rearview mirror. "You sure about this?" Maya met his gaze evenly. "He needs to see my face. He needs to know I'm not afraid of the truth." Shaq didn't argue. At 3:58 p.m., Maya stepped out of the truck alone and crossed the lot toward the rusted steel door of Hangar B. The wind had picked up, tugging at the hem of her jacket. There was no sound but the whistle of dry grass brushing concrete. She pressed her palm to the cold handle, paused once, then pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale and old, heavy with dust and something chemical. The light filtered in through a line of cracks near the ceiling, casting angled stripes across the floor. It smelled of rust and time. At the far end of the hangar, a figure stepped from the shadows. Simon Reeves, Chief Technology Officer of NavPro. The man who had stood smiling in press conferences, who had delivered polished keynote speeches about innovation and aviation safety. The man Maya had seen once, briefly, leaving Shaq's offices weeks before, exuding quiet command. He looked exactly the same now. Pressed slacks, clean-cut jaw, a fitted trench coat, hands clasped behind his back like a man who taught strategy rather than lived by it. "You came," he said. Maya stood still. "You're either very brave," he continued, stepping slowly into a shaft of light, "or very naive." "Probably both," she said. "You sent the message?" "I did." "Why?" He tilted his head, amused. "Because I admire clarity. I don't enjoy things left in pieces." "You admired my father too," she said. "Didn't stop you from silencing him." Reeves smiled faintly. "Your father was a brilliant man. Dedicated. Honest. Just inconvenient." Maya didn't flinch. "He had the data. The reports. The truth. And no one cared," Reeves said flatly. "That's the part you still don't understand. Truth without power is noise, and noise is easy to erase." He stepped to the side, revealing a small black device sitting on a crate. It looked eerily similar to the one found under Shaq's jet. Compact matte black wires folded tight. "Here," Reeves said. "Take it. Show it to your press friends. Wave it in front of your cameras. They'll say you faked it, that you doctored audio, that you were coached by a celebrity desperate for relevance." "You don't sound afraid," Maya said. "I'm not," he replied. "Because the world forgets. That's what it does best. Today's scandal is tomorrow's footnote. Your father tried. He died. No one remembered." He took a slow step forward. "You think because you found a USB stick that you've changed something? That you've rattled the gates of power? You haven't even knocked." "You're wrong," Maya said. And then she tapped the microphone hidden beneath her collar. A soft click echoed. Reeves stopped mid-step. His eyes flicked toward her chest. Outside, Morales gave the signal. Within seconds, the side door crashed open. Shaq moved first, his large frame purposeful and unhurried as he entered the hangar. Agent Morales followed, flanked by two federal officers in plain clothes. Whitmore stepped in behind them, phone in hand, already logging the GPS timestamp and confirming the feed was live. Reeves didn't move. His face didn't change. "Ah," he said coolly. "You brought the cavalry." "Always did prefer team sports," Shaq said, crossing his arms. Morales stepped forward, holding up her badge. "Simon Reeves, you're under federal investigation for obstruction, falsification of safety records, and endangerment under FAA regulation." "I'll be released by Monday," Reeves said, not even blinking. "You think any of this sticks?" "The people who built NavPro don't answer to subpoenas. They answer to stock markets and defense contracts. You seem awfully calm for a man caught mid-threat, Whitmore said, stepping closer. I'm calm, Reeves replied, because your witness is a child. Your proof is circumstantial, and public attention spans are microscopic. What happens when no one's watching? Maya stared at him. Then I'll still be watching, she said, and I'll teach others how to do it too. Reeves's smile faded. Just slightly. You're your father's daughter, he said at last. That much is obvious. No, Maya replied. I'm more than that now. I'm his proof. Morales nodded at her team. Take him. As the agents moved in, Reeves stepped back willingly, hands raised, the smugness in his posture beginning to crack. Outside, the air had changed, the wind had stilled. The silence wasn't tense now. It was filled with something else. Closure. Shaq turned to Maya. You okay? She looked down at her hands. They weren't shaking. I think so, she said, but I'm ready for what comes next. And what came next wasn't safety or ease. It was war. But now they had a name, a voice, a face, and for the first time since the crash that had stolen her father, Maya no longer stood alone. She stood as a witness, as a whistleblower, as a threat, and the world would not unhear her again. The storm didn't come from the sky. It came through servers and press leaks, boardrooms and inboxes, and it moved fast. By noon the day after Simon Reeves was detained, the first wave of damage control had begun. Maya, back in the simulator bay at the Flight Futures hangar, had just finished a radio relay test when Whitmore called her upstairs. His voice was tight, and he didn't explain. That was enough, and it made her stomach drop. Upstairs in the operations room, Shaq was standing by the conference table, arms folded across his chest, brow furrowed. The windows behind him were lined with shadow. The once bright Houston sky dulled into a leaden haze. On the monitor, a list of server logs scrolled fast, too fast. Lines of data were being overwritten, then erased entirely, like ink dissolving in water. Whitmore clicked through tabs. It started just after 3:00 a.m. Someone initiated a level 1 data purge on our off-site backups, specifically everything dated before Daniel Williams's final flight. That's restricted access, Maya said. Only 2 people in this program could have done that. Whitmore didn't turn from the screen. The ID used belonged to Kevin Tran. Shaq exhaled slowly. Kevin from Systems? Yeah, Whitmore confirmed. Came on 6 months ago. Quiet. Did his job. Never caused ripples. Until he wiped everything, Maya said, her voice low. Whitmore finally turned. He's gone. Badge left at the security desk. Laptop missing. No phone activity since last night. We've got a call out to Morales, but so far it looks like he's in the wind. Maya's heart thudded once. Loud and sharp. The files, her father's records. The evidence gone. At least from their primary source. Does that mean everything we have is gone? She asked. Shaq looked at her. His face was calm, but his eyes held a quiet urgency. Not everything, he said. Tell her. Whitmore nodded toward Maya. You mentioned a flash drive, the original one your dad left. I still have it, Maya said. She pulled her backpack from the chair, unzipped the front pocket, and withdrew the drive. I never uploaded anything to the cloud. I didn't trust it. Whitmore grinned slightly despite the tension. Smart. Shaq gave her a look that said more than words. Approval. Trust. Gratitude. Maya plugged the drive into the terminal. The folders loaded one by one. Clean, untouched. But their relief was short-lived. At exactly 2:17 p.m., Shaq's legal counsel walked into the room with his tablet in hand, and an expression like he'd just been gut-punched. You're not going to like this, he said. We just received an official letter from the FAA. Shaq gestured for him to read. The lawyer cleared his throat. Due to recent developments, including the release of unvetted data by an underage civilian, as well as the involvement of an individual currently under investigation for unauthorized access, the FAA is issuing a preliminary suspension on all Shaq-sponsored non-commercial flight operations pending internal review. Effective immediately. Maya's breath hitched. They're shutting down the charity program. That's exactly what they're doing, the lawyer said. They're calling you an unstable minor witness, citing chain of custody concerns over the evidence. And they're using the press coverage of the Reeves takedown as proof that this is a media-driven event lacking regulatory basis. Shaq sat down slowly. They're flipping it. Making it look like you fabricated this, Whitmore muttered. Maya stood still. The air in the room thickened, tightening around her chest. "They're going to make sure no one believes a word of what we found," she said. "They're going to bury it like they did before." "No," Shaq said. "Not this time." "But what can we do?" Whitmore asked. "Our backups are gone. The source data wiped. We can't verify timestamps. Chain of custody is compromised." "We don't need their systems," Maya said, gripping the flash drive. "We just need the truth. And a platform." Shaq looked at her. "You thinking press?" "No," Maya said. "Wider. Broadcast. Network level. Somewhere with visibility that can't be muted with a call or a favor. Somewhere we control the narrative from the jump." "You're talking live feed," the lawyer said. "Once it's out, it's out. No edits. No protection." Maya nodded. "That's the point." Whitmore leaned forward, voice lower. "They'll come after you. Maybe not with threats, but with questions. Accusations. Discrediting campaigns." "I'm not afraid of questions," Maya said. "I'm afraid of silence." Shaq stood. "Then we make noise. I've got a contact at the Houston Sentinel. They have a live stream studio. We can push the evidence out ourselves. Commentary. Overlays. The full context." "We'll need a full team," Whitmore said. "And Morales on standby." "She's already in," Shaq said. "I spoke to her this morning. She's furious. The charges against Reeves were real. But the timing of this FAA letter, that's coordinated damage control." Maya unplugged the flash drive, holding it tightly. "Everything's burning," she said quietly. "But not this." Shaq placed his hand gently over hers. "No. Because you lit the match." By evening, the pressure had mounted. News outlets were speculating. NavPro stock had dipped, then suddenly rebounded after a corporate press release framed the sabotage as a one-off incident under investigation, with no verified connection to core systems. They cited conspiracy misinformation and unauthorized whistleblower manipulation. They never mentioned Maya, but her name was already circulating in darker corners, anonymous forums, investor threads, the places where reputations are ruined long before facts are verified. Inside the Sentinel's downtown studio, the team set up the stream. Overhead lights dimmed as Maya adjusted the collar of her jacket. A producer handed her a mic and gestured toward the central desk. Multiple screens behind her displayed overlays of code, schematics, and a timeline. Daniel Williams's crash, Marcus's unexplained failure, and Shaq's near-death incident. Shaq stood to the side, off camera, watching like a father might before his child walks onto a court they were never meant to stand on. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Maya's voice was clear. "I've been ready since the day nobody listened." At 6:03 p.m., the live feed went live. Maya stepped into the frame. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't waver. "My name is Maya Williams. I'm 14 years old. 5 years ago, my father died in a plane crash ruled as mechanical failure. They told us it was bad luck, an isolated event. But I know better now. He tried to warn them about the NavPro V system, about the errors, and someone silenced him before he could finish his report." She lifted the flash drive. "This drive contains the evidence. The cockpit recordings, the altered data, and the voice of someone who gave the order to execute failure." Behind her, the video played. The audio echoed into the studio space. "Execute before he files. Make it look like failure." Silence followed. Then Maya looked directly into the lens. "You can choose not to believe me. But that won't change what's true, and it won't stop me from speaking." Outside, in homes and offices and coffee shops, people watched. They shared. They commented. The video began to spread, quieter than a headline, louder than death. Inside the studio, Shaq leaned against the wall, pride and fire behind his eyes. Not the kind of pride that comes from someone doing what's expected, but the kind that comes from someone refusing to be broken. They had tried to erase the story. Instead, they'd amplified it, and the fallout. It was only beginning. The city library's civic auditorium hadn't seen this much press since the mayoral runoff, but tonight every seat was taken, every wall lined with media equipment, and every camera pointed at a simple wooden podium on a modest stage. No velvet curtain, no branding backdrop. Just a white wall and truth waiting to be spoken into it. Maya stood behind the curtain in the wings, her hands clasped together, fingers twitching as if trying to memorize the words she wasn't reading from. She wore a deep navy jacket over a white shirt, the Flight Futures pin on her collar shining under the harsh lights. Her braids had been pulled into a neat ponytail, but a few strands had already freed themselves near her temples. Her palms were sweating. Shaq stood beside her, calm, silent, his expression unreadable, but his posture made a statement that he wasn't a figurehead tonight. He was a shield, and he was about to let her step in front of him. Not to protect her less, but to let the world hear her voice first. Final mic check, came a voice from the stage manager's headset. Maya exhaled slowly. Clear. The mayor was the last to finish his remarks. Something polite. A vague acknowledgement of the event's urgency and civic relevance. The kind of speech that said everything and nothing. Then he gestured toward the wings. And now, he said, stepping aside, a young woman whose courage has brought national attention to concerns too long ignored. Maya Williams. The lights brightened. Maya walked forward. The crowd didn't cheer. Didn't clap. They didn't know how to react yet. And that was fine. Silence, she had learned, wasn't a threat. It was a space, one that needed to be filled with the right words. She stepped up to the podium. A single microphone waited. Her hand reached for it. Adjusted. Then she looked into the lights, found the lens of the primary broadcast camera, and began. My name is Maya Williams. I'm 14 years old. Her voice was even. Controlled. 5 years ago, my father died in a plane crash. The report called it an accident, a mechanical failure. Nothing could have been done, they said. A pause. But that wasn't true. Gasps didn't come yet. But heads turned. Journalists adjusted their pens. The audience leaned forward in their seats. My father, Daniel Williams, was an aviation systems engineer. He worked on a guidance system called Nav Pro V, meant to improve navigation in places where GPS can't be trusted. But the system wasn't ready. He knew it. He said so. In his test logs, in internal emails, in simulator crash reports, he was ignored. And then his plane went down. She didn't shake. She didn't break. She pulled the flash drive from her jacket pocket and held it up. This drive contains the proof. His logs, his notes, the cockpit overlays, and the voice of someone who said, execute before he files. Make it look like failure. Now the reaction came. Audible gasps. Cameras zoomed. A hand from the back dropped a notepad. The moment had cracked open. Maya continued. I know I'm not supposed to be the person saying this. I'm not a pilot, not a scientist. I'm just a kid who saw something and refused to be quiet. I tried to tell people. I ran across a runway to stop a plane from taking off. I screamed because I had to. Behind her, a tall shadow stepped forward. Shaquille O'Neal. No words. Not yet. My father tried to stop a system that kills, Maya said, turning slightly, eyes sweeping across the silent room. He was silenced. But I'm still here. She stepped back from the mic. Shaq stepped forward. I believe her, he said simply. And you should too.
No flourish. No monologue. Just presence.
And then the iconic moment. His voice lowered just slightly. A whisper, but carried by every microphone in the room. Justice doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers through static. But it never stays quiet forever. The room went still. Not frozen in shock, but in acknowledgement. Something had shifted. This wasn't just a press moment. It was a reckoning. Questions flew next. Flashing lights, reporters shouting over one another. Mr. O'Neal, do you believe NavPro knowingly endangered lives? Maya, were you coached? Do you have additional witnesses? Is this going to the Senate? Has the FAA responded to your broadcast from last night? But Maya and Shaq didn't answer right away. They let the noise settle, let the message marinate in the collective consciousness of the crowd. Then Agent Morales took the mic. We have opened a joint investigation with the Department of Transportation and the FAA's Office of Safety Accountability, she said crisply. Charges are pending against multiple corporate officials. The evidence released by Miss Williams will be entered into federal record by morning. Reporters buzzed again, but none of them noticed Maya step quietly away from the podium. Her hand still wrapped around the flash drive like it was more than metal. It was her father's voice. His legacy. The truth he died protecting. Shaq followed close behind, not hovering, but near. In the hallway outside the auditorium, Maya sat on a bench beneath a mural of Houston's aerospace pioneers. Her chest rose and fell quickly, the adrenaline only now catching up with her. Shaq leaned against the wall nearby, watching her with the kind of calm that comes from someone who's seen storms and knows when they've just survived one. You did it, he said. I didn't fix anything, she replied. I just told the truth. He nodded. Sometimes that's the hardest part. Maya looked up at him. What if it's not over? She asked. What if there's more? There probably is, he said. But now they know you're not alone. That changes everything. Maya reached into her backpack and pulled out her father's photo. The one of him in front of a test simulator, arm around her toddler self. She set it on the bench beside her and stared at it. He always said I'd fly one day, she said quietly. Shaq pushed off the wall. Then it's time. And somewhere beyond the city, the wheels of consequence had already started turning. Stock inquiries, congressional statements, internal resignations. The very system that had once buried her father's voice was now choking on the echo of it. Resurrected in a girl who refused to sit down, shut up, or go away. Maya Williams hadn't just spoken truth to power, she'd made power listen. 2 months later, the sky over the West Texas airstrip was so blue it looked painted. Clear, endless, not a single cloud to catch on. It was the kind of morning that felt meant for beginnings. The kind that made you believe in open air and second chances. The tarmac stretched wide beneath the rising sun, its edges dappled with the soft shimmer of early heat waves. The wind whispered across the field in short, playful bursts, tugging at flagpoles and flight jackets like it too was excited for the day. Maya Williams, now 14 and a head taller than the girl who once sprinted across an airport yelling to stop a plane, stood beside a sleek white Cessna 72. The plane gleamed like it had been waiting just for her. Freshly waxed, spotless, steady. Her name was printed just below the cockpit window in soft black lettering. But next to it in smaller script sat a second name.
Williams D. Legacy Lev.
Her fingers brushed across the decal gently, then dropped to her side. She wore her Flight Futures jacket zipped to the collar, a crisp patch stitched to the sleeve, her instructor logbook tucked beneath one arm. Her hair was tied back tight, eyes sharp, and posture squared the way Whitmore had taught her. Weight centered, breath grounded, mind ahead of the moment. Across the field, a small group waited just beyond the cones. Shaq stood at the edge of the viewing platform, wearing a windbreaker and ball cap, his sunglasses perched on the brim. His hands were tucked into his pockets, but his attention was fully on her, like a coach on game day, except quieter now. No pep talk, no playbook, just watching. Ruth stood beside him, her church shoes sinking slightly into the dirt. She didn't speak, but her hands were clasped in front of her chest, eyes shining. The only visible part of her tension was the tiny quiver in her lip, which she kept biting back. Nira, Shaq's daughter, stood a few feet away with Morales, both of them in matching program jackets, clapping softly as the checklist was read aloud from the hangar. Maya moved with muscle memory now. Each step deliberate, rehearsed, clean. Fuel. Checked. Flaps. Set. Rudder. Centered. Brakes. Tested. Throttle. Responsive. She opened the door, climbed into the cockpit, and pulled on her headset. The smell of leather and fuel greeted her like an old friend. She exhaled slowly and reached for the key. Before ignition, she slipped a small photo out of her jacket pocket and tucked it into the corner of the dashboard beneath the altimeter. It showed her and her father, Daniel Williams, in front of an old Piper trainer. He was laughing, one hand holding her by the waist as she gripped a juice box, her braids wild and uneven. "You're coming with me," she whispered. Then she turned the key. The engine roared to life. The Cessna trembled slightly, then settled into rhythm. The propeller spun in a clean blur. Gauges lit up. The tower radioed confirmation. All systems were green. Flight Futures 1. Cleared for takeoff. Runway 18. Maya grinned. She taxied forward, the wheels gliding over the tarmac with ease. At the line, she paused, took one deep breath. "Fly the plane," she whispered, echoing the words her father used to say, not the fear. And then she pushed the throttle. The engine surged. The runway narrowed beneath her, as the nose lifted, the horizon tilting. The wheels left the ground like they were letting go of the past. Within seconds, she was airborne. The wind rushed louder now, the sky unfolding ahead in layers of soft blue and deeper indigo. Below, the patchwork of farmland and roads blurred, smaller with every heartbeat. Maya leveled off at 3,000 feet. She checked her instruments. Airspeed steady, altitude holding, trim aligned. The plane hummed in her hands like it had always belonged to her. And then the silence came, not emptiness but clarity. In that silence, a voice echoed in her memory. Fly the plane, not the fear. Her father's voice, still with her, always. She banked left slightly, circling wide across the field, feeling the lift in her chest match the lift in the wings. It wasn't just a solo flight. It was a return. Not just to the sky, but to herself. To every truth she'd carried. Every question she'd asked. Every door she'd pushed open. Even when it was locked. Back on the ground, the small group stood quietly. Ruth whispered something soft into her hand, too quiet to catch. Shaq, still watching, nodded once. Then again, slower, deeply. She didn't just save my life, he said, voice almost lost in the breeze. She gave it new purpose. Morales nodded. She gave all of us something to fight for. The plane began its descent. Maya brought it in with precision. Not rushing, not dragging. Just steady. Her eyes scanned every readout as she lined up with the strip. Throttle eased, nose tipped slightly up. The wheels kissed the ground with a soft thump. Centered, clean. She taxied to the end of the runway and powered down. The hum of the engine faded. She opened the door. An applause broke across the field. Not loud, not dramatic, but honest. Ruth wiped at her eyes without trying to hide it. Miara threw both hands in the air. Shaq smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't need to stretch wide to carry weight, just presence. Maya stepped onto the tarmac and walked toward them, flight log in hand. She didn't run. She didn't wave. She just walked tall. When she reached them, Ruth reached out and pulled her into a quiet hug, one arm firm around her shoulders. No words, just breath and history shared in silence. Shaq reached out and bumped her knuckles. You earned your wings, he said. I didn't do it alone, she replied. You did the flying, he said. That part's all you.
Morales smiled. You ready for what comes next?
Maya looked up at the sky, then back toward the runway. No, she said. But I'm still going. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, they gathered in the Williams house around bowls of Ruth's lemon chicken soup and cornbread. Whitmore arrived late, bringing old training patches and stories of Daniel from their flight school days. Laughter replaced tension, and for the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a place holding grief. It felt like a place letting it go. Later that night, in her room, Maya sat at her desk under the soft glow of her reading lamp. She opened a new notebook, leather-bound and waiting. At the top of the first page she wrote, Lessons from the Sky. Then she paused and began. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides in silence, in black boxes, in corrupted data, in voices that were never supposed to be heard. But when it finally speaks, when it climbs past the fear, the edits, the lies, it flies. Outside her window, the stars blinked quietly. Inside, so did she. If you believe voices like Maya's deserve to be heard, don't scroll past. Share her story. Start a conversation. Ask the questions others won't, because silence protects power. And truth? It flies best when we carry it together.